Hey everybody, my name is Jeff and today we are going to work on this 1963 Pontiac Catalina. So here's the big cat, 1963, two-door, hardtop, 389 automatic car. Bought it from an older gentleman. He bought it over 20 years ago with hopes to restore it, but you know, time gets away from you. He realized he was never going to get around to it, so decided to stick it on Facebook. It was on there for 9 minutes. I got a hold of him, went out there the next morning, picked it up. So as you can see, it's in pretty original condition. It's had a little bit of body work done. By body work I mean red oxide primer. That's been about the extent of it. Otherwise pretty original, not messed with. Looks like the old boy may have hit a mailbox some time ago. Won't worry about that. This is going to be nothing more than a parts car for us, whether or not it runs. So let's take a peek in the trunk, see what we can find. Oh, it's got the old south of the river trunk latch. We've got a 14 steel wheel, two 14s, some jack pieces. Oh, there's the missing piece of trim. Headlight that doesn't belong to it. Oh, new tarp. Well, road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? We've got, appears to be most of the jack parts. Now there's the tie down for the spare tire. Looks like we've got all of our original hubcaps. Anything in here? Spark plugs, that's always a good sign. Hope that's not our hood prop rod. Well, as far as the interior goes, there's not much of it. Seats taken out, missing a door card. Got the road trip holes in the floor. Now it does have the, well, what is left of the Ventura interior. You can see the plaque there. Manual windows and locks, non-tilt, non-AC. How many miles do we have on here? 90. Oh, that's probably original. This thing, I love how they just stick these AAA stickers all over these old cars all willy-nilly. No keys, good sign, all right. Nothing, no mouse house. Nothing in the ashtray. Yeah, great, definitely a parts car. Nothing going on back here. Well, kids didn't smoke, that's good. Let's see what we've got going on under the hood. Oh my goodness. So under the hood we have Pontiac's lower power option. It is a 389 cubic inch, 215 horsepower, 2-barrel engine. Now really the only options I can see on this car besides the Ventura interior would be our power steering and our power brakes. So I put my arm on this already. It seems pretty stuck, fan doesn't want to turn, so we'll dive into this and see if we can get this cranking over. First thing I like to check out is the condition of the air filter. This can tell you a lot about what the car has been through while it's been sitting. It's got 2,000 license plates on it, so we can assume that it might have ran 23 years ago. So inside the carb looks fairly clean. We've got surface rust, but that's to be expected. Choke is free. How about the throttle? Throttle is free. That's not hooked up. Where is our cable? Our throttle cable and kick down assembly seems to be MIA, so that's always a good sign, right? Aside from that, appears to be pretty complete. Looks like we've got broken plug wire, broken coil wire too. It's okay. We've got donors around here. Now I saw antifreeze spilling out when I was pulling it up onto the trailer, so there's some worse signs, I guess. At least it's not full of water. What does this have to say? Well, it's full and it's black. Sniff test? It smells like fuel. Could be worse. But at least still has hints of viscosity left. Well, I suppose let's get these plugs pulled out and we'll lubricate the cylinders before we really start to get nuts with this thing. Something I like to do before I really get nuts with these things is I like to mark my first plug wire so that I don't lose track of my firing order, because I really don't want to have to try to find top dead center again. We'll yank all our plugs off. We don't need that broken wire anymore. Let's see what lay inside. Thankfully this isn't an AC car. Getting these plugs out on these Pontiacs can be a real bear with a big old foot-long AC compressor sitting right above two of the cylinders. These plugs are going to tell us a lot about what kind of life this car's had. Well, they're rich, but I don't see moisture. That's a great sign. They even look like they might possibly could be used again. We've got Champion plugs, which I really only prefer in lawnmowers, but that's just me. I prefer Delcos, which is what was sitting in the trunk. So somebody can maybe assume at some point in the last 40 years it may have had a tune-up. Let's see what cylinder 3 tells us. We've got a little more rust than we did on that one, but a lot of that can just be from an exhaust valve hanging open, moisture coming up through the exhaust pipes. That's pretty standard, especially on something like this that has a blown out Y pipe held together by number 9 wire and a soup can. Kind of come to expect it, but that little bit of surface rust can keep us from being able to turn this engine over easily. So that's why we're going to go through the hassle of putting some oil down the cylinders. Yeah, number 5 pretty much the same as number 1, clean, sooty. Looked like it was running pretty rich, but that's kind of to be expected on the older motors. What you really like to see, if something's running perfectly, typically the end of the plugs are going to be biscuit brown. But with today's crappy unleaded gas that we have, with all the detergent in it, it's difficult to get on these old engines. What's number 7 have to say? No, it's on the ground. Well, number 7 doesn't look bad either. Soot, but no signs of rust. Let's go to the other side. Hopefully we get lucky and this side is just as good as the other. If both sides look pretty even, then I'm gonna feel a lot better about tearing into this and maybe even think that we have a chance to get this to turn again, because that's all we're really trying to accomplish with this thing. I'd like to get it to move around under its own power, and then there's gonna come a day where I'm gonna need the drivetrain out of it if it's any good. Now this one's sooty. It has a little bit of surface rust on it, but it's not all over the electrodes. So that tells us that the engine probably didn't swallow a bunch of water. The reason that it's stuck is likely due to the fact that it just had moisture creep up through the exhaust over time. Oh, I'm gonna hurt myself if I try to do that. There we are. So 2 looked good. So far, all of the plugs have matched. That's a good sign. Usually if you work on these old cars and the plugs don't match, chances are it had an oil consumption issue with one of the holes. Same way, sooty, but not totally covered in oil, no rust. This thing might want to live after all. Typically, these old GM engines, you can get them to turn, you can get them to run. Well, sometimes they're just totally covered with surface rust in the cylinders, and that can lead to no compression, but about 95% of the time, if you can get them to turn without too much hassle, you can get them to run. Now this one, you can see a little bit of a brown tinge on that electrode, and that's what we're looking for. That's biscuit brown. That's good. That tells us that that hole was probably pretty healthy. All right, last but not least, number 8. We got a little bit of resistance pulling this one out. It's not moving as freely as the others. It's coming around though. We're gonna be okay. I mean, heck, even if this engine's rusted into one big piece of iron, there's still plenty of other parts on this car to make it worth it to us. Like I said, we've got 2 other 63 convertibles that we could really use some front clip components for. For some reason, the front clip on this car looks really, really nice. That's probably the part that sat in the sunshine all the years though. All right, number 8. Yeah. So you can see some surface rust on the end of it, but it's not on the electrode. That's a good sign. That means that likely the piston was not totally submerged in water. So let's get our Marvel Mystery Oil out and we'll give each of these holes a drink. So we've got our gallon of Marvel Mystery Oil here. I prefer this just for convenience sake. I know a lot of people like to use ATF with diesel or acetone, but this stuff is already mixed together, so we're just gonna give it a whirl. I've had really good luck with this in the past, especially getting motors unstuck and getting lifter noise to quiet down. What I like to do is, if the pistons are down at the bottom of the hole, usually give them, I don't know, 5-6 pumps, but I like to get my hose in as far as I can to the hole to hopefully make sure that the entire top of the piston gets covered with it. Therefore, all of the rings can get soaked, because that's really what we're concerned about. We really don't want to break a ring on one of these things when we go to try to bar it over if it's stuck like this one is. That's what we're trying to prevent. If I loved this thing a little more than I did, I'd be pulling the distributor out to prime the oil pump and get motor to the top, or oil to the top of the motor. But we're gonna kind of roll the dice on this thing to an extent, because if this motor doesn't turn, we're not out a lot. All right, got oil in all those holes. I'll do the other side now. This is all we're doing. I got a pump for this gallon jug, running the hose straight into the hole where the spark plug came out of. We're gonna give it a few pumps. We're running low on this stuff, aren't we? We got enough to do it though. There we go. Yeah, we'll just get that filled up until you start to see it run out. Give it 5-6 pumps and that should be good. So I'm probably like a lot of you folks that are watching. I've been a little obsessed with Pontiacs ever since I was a kid. When I was 6 or 7, we went up to Minneapolis and my dad drove home a 79 Pontiac Firebird Formula, and that's really the reason that I got into cars. I mean, he always had something old when I was growing up, but that had a lot to do with it. And the other glaring Pontiac memory I have when I was a kid was I was probably about the same age. My uncle had a 76 Trans Am, and I watched him jump it through a ditch at probably 35 miles an hour on Easter Sunday. So, I don't know what that says about my family, but those are the two biggest reasons I love these old Pontiacs as much as I do. Of course, with cars and a lot of other people, it's the nostalgia aspect. We got these cylinders filled up. Let's see if we can get this thing barred over. Now, if you have a car that you're working on and you're doing this to, you're dealing with a stuck motor, and you actually like the thing, I would highly recommend letting that oil sit in there for at least a week, giving it a good chance to get the rings saturated and hopefully broke free. But we're not out a lot if this thing doesn't turn. So I went ahead and put a 15/16 socket on the end of this breaker bar, and we're gonna see if we can get it to budge. Have a little help here. All right. Nope. Does not want to. Well, as a testament to how impatient I am, we're gonna try this the wrong way. Here's a prime example of something you really want to look for when you're hooking up a battery in an old car. Looks can be deceiving. So we have a red wire as our ground, a black wire as our positive going to our starter. Now, this can get confusing. Back when these old cars had generators, they were typically, well, not generators necessarily, but 6-volt power systems. They were typically positive ground. They changed that when we went to 12-volt systems. So we are going to hook up our positive first. Of course, it's too short as luck would have it. Put that on. There's your negative. What we got? Some sparks? Maybe, maybe not. No? No, it's on. Check the cab out for the smoke test. We don't have a key, so we can't do anything about that. Oh my gosh. Golly, that light switch is not excited. See if we have any power up front. Nope. See if we have any power anywhere. It's going to be difficult to tell without a key, but we can always hotwire it. Let's do that. Luckily, Pontiac made this easy for us. So what we have here are 2 wires going down to the starter. That's our power wire, and this is what turns our solenoid on. So all we did was we took apart the connector to that purple wire, and we put one end of our steel me switch on there, and then put the other end on this terminal. Now, a lot of earlier Pontiacs have these terminals, the later ones do not. So let's see if we get lucky. Oh my gosh, we just might get lucky. I just didn't have enough lead to turn that thing over. Well, let's get out of the splash zone, because chances are if this gets spinning over a lot of oil in the cylinders, it's going to shoot them out of those holes. Let's try this. Operator, we have a bad connection. Hey, look at that, huh? Old gal's got some life left in her. If we can get her to turn. Now, a lot of the issues I'm going to have are from just me putting in the minimum amount of effort that I have to. Well, at any rate, it turned over. Now I can move it by hand, so we can go from there. Do as I say, not as I do. Oh, I thought that was gonna be it for sure. Other side. Hope I don't need to pull that off quickly. Nope. Oh, it's still playing loose. It's thinking about it. Yeah, I'll clean these up the right way. So I put my hand on the fan and the thing didn't want to turn, so I put the breaker bar back on the crank, dialed it backwards a couple degrees, and we're gonna hit the starter again. Still nothing. Well, that's good at least. Oh man, we hit a tight spot there. What we're gonna do, we'll roll this thing all the way back over counterclockwise to the point where it stops turning. Then we'll hit the starter again and see if we can bust past that rust. So what I'm trying to accomplish here is I want to get this motor to turn over by hand. Now, grab the fan blade. I can't get the crankshaft to turn, so I've been putting this bar on it. Going backwards, it seems to want to turn backwards more than it does forwards. And I've just been barring it over. Because this thing, if it were loose and if it were healthy, I should be able to turn it over by hand using the fan. Because, see, I can a little bit, but it's got hard spots. The reason you should be able to do that right now is because there's no spark plugs in it. So therefore, there shouldn't be any compression. But it's tight. Oh, it's tight. So I'm gonna keep rocking it back and forth and try to get it past the tight spots. Now it goes with the breaker bar, but there are a couple pretty tight spots in the cycle. Now those tight spots are probably the spots where the rings were sitting, where those two pistons were at in the cylinders that had surface rust on the plugs. But as you can see, it's getting a little bit easier now. Oh man, still resistance though. There we go. That wasn't so bad. That's getting a lot better. A little tough, but tolerable. That's more like it. Now we can probably expect, with the amount of resistance we have, that this thing's going to be a pretty slow turner once we put the plugs back in it. Just because now it's going to have compression on top of the friction in the cylinders, but it's getting better. It's coming around. This thing is probably going to run possibly okay on 6 out of the 8. Those other two, it might take a while for them to come back around. There's that tight spot. Mother of pearl. Watch me lose some fingers in one easy step. Boy, once it gets past that, it just wings around. That must have been what we were caught on. That's probably why initially it didn't want to turn, because the rings were probably stuck to the cylinders. Yeah, there we are. How about it? Nope. There. Oh man. There's still just a couple tight spots in there. It's getting easier. It's getting better. Oh yeah. Mother of pearl. We're gaining. Yeah, that thing doesn't even remotely want to try to turn. The starter, that is, the motor still turns, but I think our starter gave up the ghost. So we'll try a little percussion persuasion. Yeah, no difference. Well, guess I'll go see if I have another starter. Well, I'm back. Found a starter laying around that I was going to put in that 65 Grand Prix, but ended up not needing it. Got the car up in the air, and to my surprise, there's a bunch of holes where a frame rail should be, right above where I needed to stick my big stupid head. Our starter is up there. I wasn't too keen about putting myself underneath the transmission cross member that's ready to fail. So I did what I should have done in the first place. Cleaned up my battery terminals, took it apart here, wire brushed the ends, and then I hate these, but I took that apart, cleaned it out with a wire brush. Wouldn't you know it, we have turnage. So let's get this thing back down on the ground and check for some spark. So what I'm gonna do is put the #1 plug back in. And this is the point where we are going to be checking for spark at. So we're gonna insert the plug, tighten him back down, because chances are if I didn't do it now, I'd forget about it. So these are really handy. Picked it up at O'Reilly's, and it's an inline spark tester. So all you do is we find our #1 wire that we put the tape on, wherever that could have ran off to. There it is. Find your #1. Stick that in there, the point where it snaps, if it does snap. This one doesn't snap anymore. We'll make it snap. Just get your pliers out and kind of pinch the terminal area back together so that it stays tight. This is obviously not the right way to do this, but it's the way that we're gonna do it today. Yeah, it didn't work. Nice try though. Then we stick the other end onto the spark plug. So this will show us if we are completing our spark. That's going to flash when we crank it. Now, since we don't have a key, we need to hotwire the thing. So what that is going to entail is running a jumper wire from our positive battery cable to the positive side of our coil. That will give us 12 volts at the coil. That will make our coil spark. But another thing we need to do is scare up the coil wire, because ours is not Bluetooth. So let's remedy that. We've got this 65 Grand Prix sitting over here with a new set of plug wires on it. This thing runs just phenomenally for some reason, way better than I deserve. All right, there's one end. There's our other end. Okay. Slap this on big ugly and see what we got. Shake in All right, so now we have a wire there. Let's break into our electrical box. Find our wire with our alligator clip, unless it has been semi-permanently installed on something else. Oh, there we go. This'll fly. We got this. Okay. We'll just stick that there. So something to remember is the power wire goes to the positive side of the coil, and the wire going to the distributor, which feels like it's probably intact, goes on the negative side of the coil. So we'll just clamp that down underneath that nut. You know, the right way. And see how that treats us. All right, let's watch. Nothing. So what we need to do here is check our points. So the breaker points are what control the spark to each of the wires. So here's our rotor. Our rotor looks pretty alright for some crazy reason. Our points are underneath here. So we will go ahead, get this off one-handed and make sure we lose those tiny screws. So what the points do is every time the point's open, it sends out a spark down the spark plug wire. And sitting like this, the points get corroded to a point where electricity cannot pass through them. They no longer make contact with each other. This got ripped off. We'll get a better view of the points. So here they are. It is where these two little pads come together. And they look pretty corroded. I'm going to spin this so that we can get a better view at them. Oh golly. Here we go. Okay. So right here is our points. See them opening like that? So what we're just going to try to do is slap those around a little bit. Try to clean up the edges of them. Now, take the other end of our jumper wire, spin it again, see if we can see spark down there. Those aren't opening very far. Not very far at all. So when they're open, you're supposed to have about the thickness of a business card in between them. We have a fraction of that. So we need to get on this here arm, and that little screw there controls the distance they come apart. So we're going to open that just a little bit. There's nothing I dislike more than going to town, so I'm going to do everything in my power to prevent that, which includes, but is not limited to, just cleaning up these points with this nifty little points file. So we just get it in between there, scratch them up a little bit. Now, these things were pretty darn corroded. You can't see in the video, but there's a pretty good pile of dust between the two of them right now. Well, hopefully that provides us with the mating surface that we need to make this thing spark. So now, let's see if we can see any action. Hook your eyes on those points, will you? Watch this. We got spark. Let's put our ignition system back together and see if we can make this thing talk. So I've got to say, more times than I would like to admit, I forgot to put the rotor back in while doing this kind of stuff. And let me tell you, that can make for some frustrating diagnosis when you don't have that rotor in there. So, keeping with the trend of not using anything new, we're gonna get a little more use out of this here points file. What we're gonna do is we're gonna use it to clean up the contacts on the rotor and on the distributor cap. So we're just gonna run it across the outer edge of the rotor where it makes contact with the, well, contacts inside of the cap. So you've got all of these little contacts on the back side of where the plug wires go on, and we're just gonna scratch those up a little bit, knock the corrosion off, so that maybe we've got a snowball's chance of getting spark out of these wires and down to the plug. Aside from sitting, the inside of this cap doesn't look all that bad. So I've got faith that we might even be able to transfer electricity through this. Little button in the center looks good. That's not gone. So that's a good indicator that this cap really doesn't have that much time on it. Alright, so we've got our alignment notch. We need to line that up with the notch on the base of the distributor. Maybe. If I had half a brain. There we go. Put our tabs back down. All right, now let's follow our wire up to our distributor just to make sure it's in there all the way. It is. So we've got that hooked up. Put our hot wire back on our coil. Spin it. No. We do not have power down here. Ain't life grand. Can I do this one-handed? Hopefully this shocks the hell out of me. Oh, yep, we're good. Okay, we'll take that off. Don't put that on anything metal, that is hot. Whew, let's throw some plugs back in them. I don't know why, but I like to put the plugs back in the same order that they came out, only because then for future reference I can maybe tell which cylinders had corrosion on them. Alright, I'll just throw all my plugs in first and then we'll get our plug wires stuck back on there. These plugs don't look like they have a lot of time on them. The cap And rotor don't appear they had a lot of time on them either, so we're gonna assume that we might be able to use these things again. Golly, that marble in those cylinders, that makes a real mess. If you value your shop at all, I would highly recommend putting something down underneath the car before you turn it over. Okay, so we have our number one that we marked. Now the Pontiacs, they share the same firing order as the Chevrolets, but the rotor goes in the opposite direction. So here's our number one, and then we go counterclockwise. 1, 8, 4, 3. Plug number 3 in. Odds are on the driver's side, evens are on the passenger side on these. 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 5, which is our broken one. And then we have 7, which is on the very back. Come up here to the front. Yeah, it looks like number 2 was the one that was putting up a fight over on this side. Now wherever a piston is at in the rotational cycle on one side of the cylinder, or one side of the block have you, there is a piston on the other side of the block that's in the same spot. So chances are all we ended up doing was sucking up some moisture after it sat in the trees for, well, we're gonna guess about 23 years, judging by the plates. Goodness, I'm gonna need a hose bath after I'm done with this thing. There's no way my wife is gonna let me back in the house. Get our plug stuck back in there. This is exciting. We got a lock motor to spin. We got old points to spark. Not only that, we have power clear down to the spark plug wires. The end of them, mind you. Now we're about to dump fuel in this thing. See if we can get it to talk. It's a good thing there's not much for leaves or grass under us, because we would be liable to start a fire with the stuff that we're about to do. There is about to be a potentially very poorly running engine with holes in the exhaust. So that's a recipe for flames where flames shouldn't be. Good, we don't have any hood insulation left. That's awesome. So when it inevitably backfires, it's not gonna light our hood insulation up. Golly, I bet this thing is gonna talk. Okay, so we have, of course I don't know what side I'm starting on here. Where's number one? There's one. Right. One. So counterclockwise, here we go. Here's 8. That's the very back. And then next to it is 4, which is the second from the front. 4, 3, 6, which is second from the back. 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 5, 7, and then last but not least, we have 2. Okay. I'm gonna run and grab plug wire off of that Grand Prix. We needed it for number 5. Well, let's go grab our number 5 wire out of here. Oh my. This thing runs so good, I almost feel bad about taking parts off of it. $555, there's our culprit. Pop him off there. Grab our new number 5. Get that popped in. All right, let's get some gas. Now for stuff that I, for lack of better words, actually care about, I would be using 2-stroke gas so that we get a little oil in there and have some upper cylinder lubricant. But in our case, all I did was put a squirt of Marvel Mystery Oil right down the carburetor, and that's just gonna have to act as it. And another thing that I'd recommend doing so that you don't suck up a bunch of old gas if your fuel pump still works is disconnecting your fuel line before it gets to the fuel pump so that the fuel pump doesn't have a chance to draw old fuel out of the tank. But we're just gonna kind of go for it. So on these old cars with carburetors, there's gonna be a vent somewhere towards the top, and in our case our vent is right up front, and that vent is access into the fuel bowl. So what we're gonna do is mimic like we have a working fuel pump and fill up that fuel bowl with gas. This is really scientific, as you can see. I noticed that we've got a handful of broken vacuum lines that we should probably address, because if we've got vacuum leaks all over the place, this engine just isn't gonna run good. So we'll throw some caps on there. So we've got a big old full port vacuum leak at the very back that we need to cap off. If that was open, this would really run like crap, because that would be a big vacuum leak. And we've got that, but we're not using that, so no worries. Our big hoses are still hooked up. Wow, we still have vacuum advance. Okay, well, let's give this a whirl. See how much more fuel we can get in there. That's enough to start a fire. All right, hook that back up. And we're gonna hit our trigger wherever that ran off to. There goes nothing. Thinking about it. More fuel. Glad I got that on camera. Well, disconnect that before we burn up the points. Hey, it ran. Looks like that took most of the brunt. All I did was get the corner of the tailgate. Thank God for trailer hitches, huh? That was oh man, I liked that box. That was misleading because I had this car in what I thought was park. Neutral, drive. Ooh. Selector doesn't do anything. Huh. So we need to put that thing in park from underneath. So two good things. The transmission works, and the thing's got a posi. Can you believe that? Golly, this is just the parts car that keeps on giving. I can't believe this stuff. Harbor Freight jack is fine. That poor guy. Well, there's something to be said about this. So I believe somebody took our shift linkage off of this already. This is for our TV, basically our transmission pressure. But this is our gear selector, which is missing. So hopefully I did the right thing. Threw it all the way forward. It was one notch from the back, which I believe was low. So I put it all the way forward. It should be in park now, but we're gonna find out. So we'll practice some maybe mediocre preparedness this time and be a little more ready to pull that wire off. It acted like it wanted to go backwards. This could be scary. Let's make it more scary. Now we've really got that fuel bowl filled up. There we are. That is all the way full. Okay, I'll be ready to rip that off before it runs over my feet. Going backwards. So what is the opposite of reverse? Reverse is at one end, so we need to go clear to the other end. The other end is park. All right, well, that's easy enough. So I moved the gear selector clear to the other end, which ideally should be park. So now that there's not that load on it from wanting to try to go in reverse, it should run a lot better. Hopefully. Hopefully. We'll drink. Oh. There we have spark, okay. Sweet. This thing just wants to run it all or nothing. Where's my hammer at? Did I run that over? Acts like our choke might be stuck. We'll do the right thing. Not our choke, our float. Because that bowl is full right now, but it doesn't act like anything is getting through the carburetor. Yeah. Not bad. Maybe our choke needs to be open further. much for accelerator pump. Aha! Hot wire job came unhooked. Let's try that again. Yeah, it's got a snowball's chance at running good, but this carburetor ain't helping our case here. Revs up high and then it dies. I wonder what the heck. Could be a lot of things, eh? A lot of that smoke that you see is this thing trying to burn off all that oil that was in the cylinders. Oh, our bowl's about empty. There it is. Now it's full. Now it might run a little longer. Almost. Well, we did what I thought we couldn't do today. We got this thing running, not well, but I'm sure a lot of that has to do with the ancient carburetor and us not having an actual fuel system. But much to my surprise, we took a locked engine, we got it unstuck, and we got the thing running and even accidentally moving. So if you guys want to see me do any more to this thing, let me know. I'd probably do a carb rebuild, but I don't know if I'd go much further because this thing is tough. I mean, it doesn't look that bad from the outside, but after seeing that frame, I just can't believe that I can even open the doors on this thing. But stay tuned. We're going to tackle a few more of these things. Thanks for watching.